Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome the author and illustrator for a kid's book about long-term care, Jenny Abeling and Mary Mattews. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us here. We're so excited to talk about our new book.
Yeah, we are too. Kids, I have young kids and, we deal with families all the time, and children are usually the ones that have the hardest time understanding what might be going on with grandma or grandpa or, even sometimes a parent in some cases. And part of the problem too is, they are children, but adults don't often know how to explain it to children because they're not a part of the healthcare atmosphere or environment. And so they can't answer, well, Mom, why did Grandpa not know who I was? What is dementia? What is this? What is that? And, you guys, it sounds like really took it upon yourselves to try to help make those conversations a lot easier. And so I'm really excited to have you guys here with us today. I want to kind of start, though, with the question, what really inspired you to create this book?
Yeah. So running a long-term care facility during COVID taught me so many different things. First of all, it taught me that we're not having enough conversations about long-term care that includes multi-generational families, communities, neighborhoods, things like that. Also, kids often come into long-term care either at home or in a facility setting, and they're scared. They have anxiety around it, and it's very much an unknown. So the inspiration is, books are platforms for conversations. Sometimes we avoid hard things with kids. We also say, hey, let's not bug them with this really hard thing. They're not ready for it, or their lives are just full of joy and play. Let's not go there. But in reality, care is happening all around us all the time. And COVID just made it so that we really had to focus on it. I'd have families calling me during the pandemic saying, what should I say to my kids? What should I talk about? Why can't we see our loved ones anymore? Why can't we really sometimes talk to them? What is going on? So people don't know where to begin. And myself, I've always been a huge book lover, somebody that went to the library all the time with my parents growing up. This is how I started having harder conversations about, more adult subjects. And I wanted to really make it not just an adult subject. This is a subject for everybody because long-term care happens for kids. It happens to our parents. It happens to our grandparents. It happens to our neighbors, our church friends, our synagogue friends. Everywhere you go, there's examples of care, and we're just not talking about it.
Sure. How about for you, Mary? You're the illustrator of the book. Was this something more personal for you, or was this more of, a chance to do illustration, or kind of how did you come at the book?
Yeah, Jenny and I crossed paths at a job about a year and a half ago, and she mentioned the book, and I have been illustrating for, about 6 or 7 years, and definitely have had long-term care happen in my life. Lived with my grandmother as a kid and cared for her at the end of her life, and then my mom as well. So yeah, have a lot of experience in it, and was thrilled to participate in it for sure.
Did you learn anything maybe new? It's, Jenny has a little bit of a background in long-term care. Was this educational for you as well, or was there things you had already known, or?
Yeah, no, I often say it's the book I wish I had when my mom was dying, like as an adult. I think it speaks to so much about so much.
Yeah.
So as much as it is a kid's book, and meant to be read together with like families and parents. Yeah, it really lays out a lot, because, like she said, we don't talk about it enough, early enough, often enough. So yeah, it was like it's a resource for me post that experience for sure.
Absolutely. I can appreciate that. My book is a family caregiver's guide for families, and I really wrote it through the lens of what I wish I knew when I needed to know it. And because so many families, go through this caregiving journey, and then when you add the children into that mix, it just adds more, complications really. We had the team behind the book Dancing with Memories on a couple years ago, and it was just a profound book on dealing with dementia for grandma, and just a wonderful story. And they came on right before they got bought out by HarperCollins, and they said it's something that doesn't get talked about near enough. I know there are other children's books out there, but I don't think there's enough of them out there. And you guys are actually the second authors and illustrators that have been on our show who have a specialized book for children. So I thank you guys for, taking the time out to be here and for, bringing this book to market. So let's talk about children a little bit. How do you approach explaining, complex topics like long-term care to children?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this book is for ages 5+, and it's a read together book. So that means that whoever your adult person in your life is, whether that's a parent, a neighbor, a grandma, grandpa, a foster parent, it's a read together book, because not only do kids need help understanding these complex thoughts, the parents do too. So it's meant to be done together. And what we really focus on in the book is the foundational items that bridge all human beings together, which is caring, community, and empathy. So yeah, we could talk about, the need for, catheters and things like that, but that doesn't relate to kids. What relates to kids is the different members of their community and the different needs that people have. So we focus on just the everyday things that humans need. And Mary illustrates this beautifully in the book, which is everybody has to brush their teeth, and everybody needs to take a shower. Everybody needs to get out of bed. And these are things that when you say them out loud, you're like, duh, obviously. But for kids, they're like, oh, I do those things, because you're trying to find that human experience that's relatable to children. And yes, there's scary things about long-term care, and we could go off on that tangent. But for a beginning conversation, it's really like, what are the basics? What do people look like when they might need care? How might things change when they need care? And what, as a community and as an individual, can we do to just identify these things, understand them, and be more empathetic to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to add anything to that, Mary?
No, she said it all.
Okay. Well, and I appreciate Mary being here because, she's the illustrator of the book. And just like I told the illustrator of the other children's book, the words are telling the story, right? But so are the pictures. And especially I think when you get to the child age level of a book, they want to also see the story rather than just read the story. I was reading a book to my son last night. He's 7. And it's Geronimo Stilton. I don't know if any of you know that series. It's phenomenal. It's gone from our 12-year-old daughter all the way down now to our 7-year-old son. And, it's about a rat, and he goes on all these wild adventures, and there's geography and, cultural and all this stuff. And last night it was about a marathon, but it was a rat marathon, and, kind of playing off of the New York City Marathon. But he wanted, we're reading the pages, and I'm doing more of just the reading the words, and using some, inflection in my voice and different things to keep it entertaining. But before I ever turn each page, he wants to study the pictures, because I think that's also how they're processing it. And, looking through your guys' book, like I didn't see page number, but like, I don't know if I'm trying to show the viewers, this page where it says kids assist their elders with technology to help us all stay connected. Well, technology is a pretty loaded word, right? I mean, technology could be any number of things. But when a child, because the first thing I look at is I see, grandma's holding a tablet, so immediately, I can associate that with, people using a tablet and all these things. And one of, the book is loaded with great information, phenomenal pictures, Mary. But one of the things for me personally, and it's obviously subjective, but I think the whole summarization of the book could be said in these 2 pages. It says, at some point, everyone will need some kind of long-term care support. Yes, everyone, exclamation point. So it's important we all understand what it is. If I didn't read anything else in the book, that would tell me everything I need to know right there. And again, there's a lot of other great information and things and illustrations in the book. But I think even for parents, we encounter families daily, multiple families, and this is over years of time as well. You meet with that son or that daughter-in-law or whoever the adult child is of that elderly person you're taking care of. They're almost as lost and confused as a child would be when you talk to them about it. So it's a children's book, but I think it's also a great way, not only for the parent to spend time with their child and try to safely and appropriately educate them and explain it to them on their level, but I would dare say the parent's probably getting some education and understanding out of it as well.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to learn from each other as kids and adults. And yeah, I mean, again, like it's interesting when we are out in the world with this book, doing, we do school event readings, and then we do like a drawing exercise where we ask kids to draw what they think they're going to look like when they're 70 and 80 years old. And what their faces will look like. And so it kind of gets them in their own mind about that far into the future and maybe what, their life would look like or what they want it to look like. And also having conversations with adults, they see just the cover of the book in public and, instantly they launch into, oh, I cared for my grandmother as a kid, or I'm in the middle of this with my mom right now. And it's almost like this great conduit for people to be able to talk about it out loud. And often it's easier to talk about it with strangers in that environment than with people in your life, because you're both in it together and it's a lot, so it has this kind of extra experience we're having of, I wouldn't say therapy, but, it feels that way sometimes.
It could be therapeutic for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And I want to note it's 99.9% women who are having these conversations with us. Not to say that those are all caretakers, but it's just been very interesting to see how many women are doing this,
We talk about that a lot on the show. I was a family caregiver for my father, but when I was in the thralls of it, I never identified or considered myself a family caregiver. I was a son helping my father. Hindsight is always beneficial for all of us. And, I think that's also a whole nother issue. I don't want to go down with you guys because I want to talk more about the book. But, we had one of the best universities in the country, if not the world, coming to our home 2-3 days a week, not as caregivers, but as healthcare professionals for, a variety of my father's health needs. But even they never said to, like, my wife and I, who were in our early 20s, newlyweds, I'm pursuing medical school, she's got her degree, she started her career, but never did anybody hand us a resource or a pamphlet or information to say, here's also how you can get help for yourselves as you're going through this. But that goes back to the male caregiver part too. I think sometimes males, rightly or wrongly, are a little shy in identifying as a caregiver. That wasn't my case. I just never heard the expression family caregiver. I'm just doing what I thought you do for a parent or a loved one that needs help. But I think sometimes men shy away from that. Now, could I have done the same thing for my mother? Not to the extent I did for my father. I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I tell families all the time, the son may not want to help shower or bathe mom, but the son could help coordinate communication with the rest of the family, with doctors, get prescriptions ordered, and things like that. There are other roles you can do, which is still being a caregiver without actually having to get into that personal space of the hands-on caregiving. So I digress, but I want to go back to you though, Mary, and tell us a little bit more about your creative process and kind of what the process was behind the illustrations, and then you guys can talk about the narrative in the book. How did you ensure that these visuals complemented the story and made it more accessible for kids? I'm going to use my son and pick on him again, and I'm going to share this. Don't anybody say anything, even though, however many people will hear or see this. He's a boy's boy, right? He's a boy's boy. But there are certain things in movies that you would not even consider to be terrifying necessarily, but they frighten him, and I'll put it out there. One of the things he cannot stand is the witch on Wizard of Oz. He will leave the room if we're watching that movie. That is something, he's a no-go, but he could do anything else that typical, you would think is more masculine, if you will. So how did you make it so it wasn't like, what was your process? Because I could see, you get into long-term care, you can have sickly people, you could have all these different things that for a child, you see tubes and cords and all this stuff. It could be frightening. And then they think, oh, mom, is that going to happen to you? Like, it had to be, I'm assuming, a careful process behind your, illustrations and your, creative ideas.
Yeah, I mean, well, Jenny and I talked from the beginning about representation, that it was so important to show what the world looks like inside the book. So that means people of color, people of different sizes and shapes. We had some great sit-down interviews with long-term care workers that Jenny has known throughout her career, and they're represented in the book. So these are real people, real faces. I'm not sure what page number that's on, but part of the book is encouraging young kids to go into this field and be a professional caregiver. So all of those are portraits of real people. And then bringing in a little like personal touches as well, like the image you held up with the grandmother and the granddaughter and the iPad, that's actually Jenny's daughter, Nico, and Jenny's grandmother, who were not able to meet in life, unfortunately, but here they are together alive on the page, which is very cool. So yeah, just thinking of different types of long-term care, from things that take place in school, that kids encounter. There are aides that help kids in their classrooms. That's a type of long-term care. Neighbors, that you see across the street. Just really thinking in the way that, not to compare this to Harry Potter at all, but what's great about Harry Potter's the series is that they are putting what exists in the real world into the wizard world, right? There are banks, there are grocery stores, there are all kind of those versions of, right? So just really having a kid's and a family's world reflected back at them was the goal. And that was kind of the plan.
Okay, great. Jenny, did you have any, and I'm sure you guys were, communicating back and forth and strategizing. Did you have any visions in mind that you were wanting her to illustrate, or did you just leave it to her to take your story and bring it to life through pictures?
So like Mary mentioned, when I started out on this book with the publisher, I didn't want to be like the lone person who speaks for long-term care. Yes, I have an enormous amount of experience in it, but everybody's experience is different and everybody brings different, skills and ways to communicate about it. So Mary and I actually set out doing interviews with consumers, workers, advocates, all over the country. And what we heard from them in terms of what it looks like and what representation matters is that currently some people have it in their mind of like the old, like kind of nursing home. Like somebody goes into this institutionalized setting and it's scary and the walls are plain and they're this ugly color and it smells. Well, is that the world we want in the future for long-term care? No. So we're not going to represent that in the book. Yes, people go into nursing homes. I've worked in lots of them. But there's a wide variety of long-term care settings and situations. So we wanted to hear a wide variety of those things. And we wanted there to be real people in the book. So like Mary said, those workers in the book, those are all real nurses and CNAs and medication aides and, do a wide variety of things. And then we also have just like family caregivers as well. And real life people that are our own family in it as well, because we all have our own long-term care journey. And that's kind of the whole point of the book. Like you said, that one page sums it up, is that everybody is going to have a long-term care experience, whether that be with a loved one, for yourself. That is the kind of the arc of aging sometimes. And it depends, what acuity you might have. But to kids, the acuity and all the really complex care needs, that's not really where we need to start. We need to start with the basics of what does it look like and where do you see it and where might you get involved? Because, I'm very solution based. We could talk for hours about all the problems. But really, as a solution-based person, you have to think about, like, how do we fix a lot of the issues? And one of the biggest issues is that we don't have enough caregivers and we don't have enough people that want to go into long-term care, especially post-COVID. So how are we going to change the hearts and minds of folks to be like, hey, this is somewhere I want to be. This is something I'm good at. Kids are natural caregivers. They also are naturally very resilient, and we do not give them credit for their resiliency. And so when I see my daughter, interacting with folks, I brought my daughter to long-term care facilities before COVID for years, and she loved it because nothing was hidden. We would walk to rooms. She would be there when people's blood pressure was being taken and things like that. And not only did the residents love it, she loved it. It became more of an intergenerational space, which is one thing that's missing really in long-term care, is that we have separated and siloed folks, either in homes where people feel isolated with their loved one as family caregiver, or in facilities. And we've kind of said, you guys just go over there and we got a space for you over there. And everybody else in society is just kind of carrying along over there. And we need to really get back to an intergenerational kind of society outlook on care. And so this book is kind of just one way to start that intergenerational message.
Wonderful. Now, you also have a company called Gal Pal Productions. Why don't you share with the viewers and listeners what Gal Pal Productions is?
Sure. So out of the book and these interviews with these workers, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, I think there's more here, not just with this topic, but I think a lot of different things we could do together. I have a background in television production and a lot of documentary work within the U.S. labor movement. For about a decade, I traveled the country interviewing workers at all types of jobs all over about the issues they were facing, and did a lot of lobbying work on their behalf and all that kind of stuff. And we just kind of looked at advocacy and organizations in this country as having, doing so much for so many, but not always having the internal capacity to tell their own stories and to show their growth and their missions and that type of thing. So we created Gal Pal as kind of a place to, tell stories with these organizations about what they're doing in the world, specifically lifting up voices of women, BIPOC, LGBTQIA, aging, disabled folks, and people running for office, people in politics and policy. So we work with all kinds of groups, creating video series and digital ad campaigns and just unique original projects all over the place.
Do you guys have a podcast right now?
Pardon me?
Does it also have a podcast? Because you were talking about
we don't. We feel like the podcast party is very packed right now. So we are concentrating right now on more video and film. I do see a podcast for us in the future, for sure. We're building towards that, but yeah, we don't currently have one at this time.
Yeah.
But thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you're telling that story, I'm thinking of a good friend of mine, Susie Singer Carter. You guys may know her.
Yeah, I'm in her documentary that's coming
Yeah.
up, No Country for Old People.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been cheering them on and trying to get the word out about that because it kind of zeroes in on what you were talking about, Mary. With these workers, long-term care, and Jenny had mentioned earlier, it's far worse now post-COVID, but it wasn't great pre-COVID either. These facilities are so understaffed for, I feel like far too many of them. It's more of an investment, and investment is all about the bottom line. That's why me personally, professionally and personally, I think home care is such a stronger option because that person is going to get the attention and the care they need, and they're not going to just be a number in a hallway. So yeah, I'm anxious to see when the film gets released. And Jenny, I think that might have been how we came to know each other. I think she might have introduced you to.
Yeah. Susie and me have really hit it off. So she asked me to be in the film. And we've talked a lot about productions just around long-term care because it's tricky. It's a tricky place to be in terms of there's a lot of people that don't want you to talk about this, and there's a lot of people who sometimes don't want to give you a peek behind the curtain. So because of that, we've kind of hit it off. I can't wait to see the film. I really think it's gonna kind of ruffle some needed feathers that need to be ruffled.
Yeah. And I mean, I would go as far as even saying it could be a turning point in how long-term care is viewed in the country as a whole. I really, truly do because
just the basics. People don't know the basics. And I think this is going to be so eye-opening because Susie's story is coming from somebody that had resources and was available to be there. So there's a lot of people that can't be there and can't show up. They're at work. They have 2 jobs, whatever. And people don't know like who's going to pay for it and like what kind of care you're going to receive. Because one thing that GalPal is like one of our biggest missions is we have been presented with the stock photo world of older folks.
Yeah.
And that is not real. And so one thing we're doing is we're working with organizations to get away from stock photos and imagery because it's presenting a world that is not real. And it's also, there's no way to latch on to like the human spirit and human experience when you're looking or seeing a video of stock photos.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's not a real person. We're also showing somebody who's aging like impeccably well. And that's just not real.
To me, it's a lot like, Instagram and, all these social media. Everybody's putting on these filtered, touched up photo. Like, this is not real life. This is not real life. So I want to talk a little bit about what you just were kind of alluding to. In your experiences, how have long-term care consumers been represented in the media and marketing, and how does that need to change? And I think you kind of just answered it.
Yeah, I have so many experiences in different settings, whether, being a caregiver in people's homes or in facilities. And the people I see are as diverse as this country. People are aging at all different at all different speeds. In terms of their needs, it's all over the place. In terms of their resources, so what people can actually afford, and the support circles around folks, so those are all different for everybody. So we need to represent that to really show, because that's where you connect. And those are the conversations we have with people. When we hand them the book, there's just tears coming because people were like, I never saw myself going to be in this situation.
Right.
I never saw my mom needing this sort of level of care. And then when they are at the hospital, this is how it all plays out. Like, I used to be an admissions person, and this is where I, Susie wanted me to talk about. So as an admissions person at a long-term care facility, the first thing that you're looking at when somebody is like in the hospital needing to come is like, what is their payer, which is like their insurance, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you're like pricing them out, which is horrible. And then somebody at the hospital hands you 3 pamphlets of 3 different facilities, and they're all stock photos of consumers and residents that are not real people. So you're not getting this real, like, open-eyed look from the beginning. And then you get there and to the facility and you're like, well, this isn't what it looks like. And this is not what I was told. And this is not how it should be. And so those consumers aren't represented from the very beginning. Before they even get to needing care or needing a facility, they're not actual real people and they're not seeing a real setting. So there's disappointment immediately. So when you get there, the facility and the people that are working there have so much, the makeup that they have to do, because our expectations of what long-term care is and what the reality is so separated. And that's just the work of marketing geniuses and senior care who are like, we're not going to really show what it looks like. We're going to show this beautified version of it. And then they'll figure it out, like, when they get there. And once they get there, what are they going to do? They're not going to leave, because they need help. They're coming in a vulnerable position. So they don't have something to stand on to be like, hey, you tricked me. These are stock images. This isn't real. So consumers are kind of
Hoodwinked,
lied to in a way, and misrepresented in the actual materials, on the websites and the pamphlets. It's not a real experience. So consumers are kind of being duped.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, and I'm not trying to minimize it or make an exact comparison, but have you ever seen those McDonald's commercials and how nice and beautiful those hamburgers look, and then you actually get it and open it up? My daughter said to me once, she goes, "Dad, that doesn't look like the picture," and but that's really, it's the same thing. They want to give you this paradise almost, feeling and look, but that's not what it is. And we're not trying to go to paradise. We're trying to go to be cared for. And, the reality is there's good and bad, and just be honest and upfront with people, I think would serve you a lot better than giving this false representation.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And one thing I implemented at a facility, kind of trying to change the tides, was we did like a 3-day orientation for new residents. And what does it mean to live in a facility? Because that's a whole nother thing, is like, I don't know what this schedule is going to be like. I don't know how this is going to work. And you have workers just walking in the room assuming that folks know this. So like for the workers and the consumer, when a new person comes in, we need to have like an orientation education, because we haven't done this as a society.
Right.
So we have to do it on the spot, basically.
Yeah. I know we talked to a gentleman not too long ago, and he actually stayed in a facility for 30 days for research for his work he was doing. And he just said, how do people live like this? He treated himself as though he was a patient, and it was pretty remarkable. I was surprised actually they let him do it, but they did. Yeah. So what role do you see for educational content like this book in helping to shape, a better understanding in our society and in the public on long-term care, and even the work of the staff and the caregivers?
Yeah. I think Mary and I, through our experience with this book, we do events at schools and bookstores and, in any place that really wants to have it. And what we hear as a response is that the kids love it, because it's talking about caring and community, which is something that's normal to them and they love anyways. It's also really helpful to all the adults in the room, which are like the teachers and the librarians and the bookstore owners and all the people going through, and then the parents and communities. So I foresee a caring like curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so many issues are going on with younger folks. I'm sure you know this. You have a 7-year-old. I have a almost 10-year-old daughter. And just talking to teachers is like, yes, the math and the reading and all of the things needs to happen, and we lost some time during COVID. But there's all these other issues going on. There's mental health issues and anxiety issues and, just the kind of fear of the unknown and what people are seeing on social media and the news and things like that. So how do we counteract that with a narrative that's all about caring and community? The world is such a vast place right now. And with social media and 24/7 news cycle, it's just like, oh my God, there's so many issues in the world. What I think we want to focus on is your local community and caring for your 7-mile radius around you. And those micro communities make up a larger, bigger community. So moving forward, we'll be doing lots more events where we're talking about, caring and what that looks like. And ultimately, hopefully, do caring curriculum, caring workbooks, things for kids that they can relate to and grasp onto. On another foot is the policy side of things that kids don't think about, but how are we, there's a huge wave right now, and I'm sure you know this, of there is some harsh slapback to facilities right now, especially post-COVID. People are I don't want to be there. Right. I want to age in place or age in community. And so that's where home care and family caregivers, a lot in the policy space has to change so that these young people get these ideas and this education about caring for their communities. And then there's a pathway to make it a career. Because one thing we've done is we've underpaid and underfunded community-based care. And now we are swinging back based on laws with the federal government, and where we're seeing more support for family caregivers, we're seeing more support for home care. That's what people want. They want to be in community and they don't want to be siloed. So how do we get it to be where kids can learn about caring and learn about caring about their community and then see a career pathway that is they can make a living and they get treated well and they get benefits and all the things that you need.
Right. And
then we get kids on that pathway. Because like Mary said, a lot of the people that are illustrated in the book are real caregivers. And I met 2 twins and a friend who are they were all 17 when I met them. They became CNAs through a high school apprenticeship program. And then one is now a nurse, another one is going to nursing school. There's the career, lattice of choices that you can have once you get into long-term care. And so it's how do we get people moving in that direction?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mary, or?
Nope. All good. She said it all.
All right. So I want to ask the two of you one question, and maybe you'll have a different answer, maybe you won't. But is there one thing that surprised you when you initially decided to do the book, and now that it's published and it's out there and it's known, that you did not expect? I'll start with you, Mary.
Oh, great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I did not expect. Honestly, I mentioned it already. I think I didn't expect people to come to us and speak so openly and honestly about their own experiences and struggles they're having around this currently. Okay. It seems to be, just leaking out of them. And I think, so I very much feel for these folks and happy that the book is resonating and it's working for them as adults and to share it with their kids too. So yeah, I would say that surprised me. I did not expect that at all.
Okay. All right. How about you, Jenny?
I agree with Mary. It's just people do not have a platform to talk about this. And I see that changing because there's a lot of resources like you and people out there who are trying to change that. But I think the most surprising thing to me is kids, the reaction from kids. Okay. Because even though it's a big topic and even though it's there can be some hard words in there, which Mary and I very deliberately put definitions to things in the book, because the parents aren't going to know the definition either. So we're going to have to really spell it out in the book. it's not hard for kids to understand at all. It's actually really easy because they're like, oh, brushing your teeth and needing, help, your neighbor, carrying groceries or going to the pharmacy for them. Those are all things that people are doing all the time. And you're already doing them in your families too. Like I'm already going to the pharmacy and getting medication. So like of having somebody else help get that medication and bring it to your neighbor, like that's actually just being a community member. We're not saying like kids, you're like a long-term care worker. You're literally just being a good community member. And post-COVID, with so much separation, kids want to be together.
Right.
Like we need to get people back together in a safe way, obviously, because people are still vulnerable to COVID and there's stuff happening still. But how do we bring community members back together? And one big idea that is a conversation, kind of surprising how willing kids are, is like we talk about volunteering at the end. Because what is the call to action from the book? The call to action from the book is to get involved. And how do you get involved? Well, you talk to your parent and you figure out in your local community. You don't need to take on the world. We're not telling you need to fix long-term care. We're just saying in your local, I always keep going back, 7-mile local community. What can you do? Well, there's probably a few different facilities. There's probably a senior center. There's probably volunteer programs. So how do you get involved with your family? Mm-hmm. And volunteering is something that like I just did a lot as a kid with my family, and I just want to continue that on in our communities. We need so many volunteers. Yeah. Until things are better paid for and resourced, we're really relying on a lot of volunteers and just the kindness of community. So I think kids are surprisingly latching on to that. And then they're like, well, where do I go and what do I do? And so that's like kind of the next thing is like, we probably need kind of resource programs that are probably through like the Agency on Aging and the different organizations that are local to really get people excited about volunteering. And then also connecting people to awesome aging organizations that have programs, like one here in Oregon has like a circle of care model, which is like you're in that small little community, you want to volunteer, connecting people together so people can stay in their own homes.
Right.
Because this, like in home care, is sometimes it's one thing. It's like that one thing. They can't administer their medications.
Right.
Like that could be the one thing that's like, oh, I can't do this. So I need to go move into a nursing home or an assisted living. And that's not what people want. So how do we as a community support people?
Oh, that's wonderful. I like to ask guests this all the time. And so I'm interested in hearing your guys' answers. If we didn't speak or stay in contact, which I hope we will, say we run into each other at a Starbucks or something 5 years from now, what have you done or what's on the horizon for Gal Pal Productions? And is there a future book in the works or some fun project or anything you can share at this time?
Yeah, so what's great about the company is we kind of have two avenues. There's the production for hire work that I mentioned before, and then there's the development side, where in the experiences we're having in the world with different organizations we're working with and topics we're covering, there's real room to develop television series, documentaries, to then pitch out in the world to be made, at a larger scale. So yeah, I would say that I can't really speak specifically to some of the stuff we're working on because we love to keep things super secret until they're not, but that a lot of that work would be out in the world and, going and growing for sure.
Wonderful. Jenny, anything you want to
add? We talked at first about doing like a series of these books. They wanted to talk about like home care specifically and hospice specifically. And, publishing a book with a publishing company is like kind of a new situation for us. So we are thinking about putting out a series that would cover multiple different subjects.
Yeah.
And really it's about representation. And like Mary said, is like the Harry Potter, it's like the real world things that you see in the real world, but then also making them applicable for education and learning with kids. And then in the future, I see media and weaving this new narrative as changing like cultural perspectives and minds. And we have a lot of momentum around that right now. So in the next 5 years, like I hope that we're in a way different situation around caring for our loved ones based on all of like the media that's being pushed out into the world. So many people like you talking about this, and Susie making documentaries, and Gal Pal doing all sorts of really fun things that we're like launching right now, where we're changing the cultural narrative. And that's what matters, because, I'm in my 40s and I will be in my 70s before I know it. And if we don't do something about this right now, then we are going to be in the same position, and it's not going to be pretty. And so we need to really change the hearts and minds of folks, and we can do that creatively through Gal Pal.
And you guys are, and Mary Mattews and Jenny Abeling, thank you guys so much for taking time out to talk with us today, and for just the incredible advocacy and work that the two of you are doing. Mary, I love the pictures. I always appreciate people that can do things that I can't. Even when you were talking about having the kids, draw themselves as seniors, I'm thinking in my head, like, how would I make a stick figure look old? But
hey, I want to speak to that. Okay. I want to encourage you, because I didn't think I could draw, and an artist friend of mine told me 99% of drawing is redrawing. That it's not about getting it perfect the first time, and then there's the whole, if you put 10,000 hours into something, you will be proficient and great at it. So start the clock, buddy. Let's go.
All right. Well, I'll have to work on my stick figures first. I can't even draw a straight line with a ruler, but I'll practice, Mary, and I'll send you a picture.
All right. I believe in you.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you both. And, anytime you'd like to come back, or anytime you have some exciting news, let us know, and we'll get you back on All Home Care Matters, and just keep fighting the good fight and helping to raise advocacy and awareness.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms, or you can watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Jenny Abeling and Mary Mattews for joining us today to talk about their new book, A Kid's Book About Long-Term Care.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.